Hey y'all, welcome to Sandy's Library. I'm Sandy and I'm here with my daughter Sara, and we're revisiting a video series that I started a couple of years ago about the raw material and the law of one. And let me just say y'all, the law of one is something that I truly and wholeheartedly resonate with. As for raw, I'm still reserving judgment on that one. And if you don't know what the raw material is, briefly, it's a series of 106 channeled sessions from 1981 to 1984 between Don Elkins, a professor of physics and a UFO investigator, and Ra, speaking through Carla Roykert. A third person, Jim McCarty, was also present during the channeled sessions. In this material, Ra states that they are a sixth density social memory complex that formed on Venus about 2.6 billion years ago. It's also worth noting that Ra says they are humble messengers of the law of one, and that they previously tried to spread that message in Egypt with mixed results. And y'all can find all the sessions online, and they're available to freely view at the lawofone.info website. And there is a link posted in the description. And let me just say that Ra does use some pretty complex terms, but after each Q&A, I'm going to try and bring it down into third density terms. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to read Don's questions from each session, and Sara will read Ra's answers. And just real quick, let me say that we do have 4 mini Dachshunds. So you may hear them walking around, moaning and groaning, flapping their ears, other shit like that. So just ignore it, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This is the Law of One, Session 1. Original recording date, January 15th, 1981. So first, we have the intro where one day Ra starts talking through Carla, where they introduce themselves. And we're just going to delve right in.
I am Ra. I have not spoken through this instrument before. We had to wait until she was precisely tuned as we send a narrowband vibration. We greet you in the love and in the light of our infinite Creator. We have watched your group. We have been called to your group, for you have a need for the diversity of experiences and channeling which go with a more intensive, or as you might call it, advanced approach to the system of studying the patterns of the illusions of your body, your mind, and your spirit, which you call seeking the truth. We hope to offer you a somewhat different slant upon the information which is always and ever the same. The Confederation of Planets in the service of the infinite Creator has only one important statement. That statement, my friends, as you know, is all things, all of life, all of the creation is part of one original thought. We will exercise each channel if we are able to. The reception of our beam is a somewhat more advanced feat than some of the more broad vibration channels opened by other members for more introductory and intermediate work. Let us for a moment consider thought. What is it, my friends, to take thought? Took you then thought today? What thoughts did you think today? What thoughts were part of the original thought today? In how many of your thoughts did the creation abide? Was love contained and was service freely given? You are not part of a material universe. You are part of a thought. you are dancing in a ballroom in which there is no material. You are dancing thoughts. You move your body, your mind, and your spirit in somewhat eccentric patterns, for you have not completely grasped the concept that you are part of the original thought. We would at this time transfer to an instrument known as Dawn. I am Ra.
There is a 2-minute pause on the original recording before Ra speaks again through Carla.
I am Ra. I am again with this instrument. We are close to initiating a contact, but are having difficulty penetrating a certain mental tension and distraction that is somewhat characteristic of this channel. We will therefore describe the type of vibration which is being sent. The instrument will find us entering the energy field at a slight angle towards the back of the top of the head in a narrow but strong area of intensity. We are not able to offer any conditioning due to our own transmitting limitations. Therefore, if the instrument can feel this particular effect, he may then speak our thoughts as they come to him. We will again attempt this contact. I am Ra.
So, on the original recording, there's a 90-second pause, then Ra returns.
This instrument is resisting our contact. However, we assure her that we are satisfied that contact with the one known as Dawn is not at this time preferable to that instrument. We will therefore move on to the one known as Leonard. Again, we caution the instrument that it is a narrowband communication which is felt as a vibration entering the aura. We will now transfer this contact. I am Ra.
There is another 90-second pause. Then Ra picks up again through Carla.
I am Ra. We greet you once more in the love and the light of our infinite Creator. We ask that you be patient with us, for we are a difficult channel to receive. However, we may perhaps add some dimensions to your understanding. At this time, we would be glad to attempt to speak to any subject or question which those entities in the room may have potential use in the requesting.
Okay, so Ra's intro confirms for me that Ra considers people to be entities. And they said that they themselves are a hard frequency to tune into. Y'all remember that. Tuck it away into the back of your mind for later reference. And remember when they said the confederation of planets in the service of the infinite Creator has only one important statement? All things, all of life, all of creation is part of one original thought. Okay, so I have a couple of points to make about that. One, the confederation of planets, initially that made me afraid of aliens. And in fact, Ra does seem to become a little bit annoyed that Don and Jim assume that's what they are, aliens. And I know a lot of people out there will say that Carla was just faking it. But if you listen to the original recordings, which I have done, it's so inconceivable that Carla could have been faking this. If she was, she missed her calling. She should have gone to Hollywood. Okay, so let's get to the Q&As, and some of Ra's answers are really convoluted, so we may well be breaking up some of them into parts for closer examination. It's also interesting to note that with every response, Ra begins by saying, I am Ra, at least in this session anyway. Question number 1. It seems members of the Confederation have a specific purpose. Is this true with you? And if so, what is your purpose?
I am Ra. We communicate now. We too have our purpose. In our vibration, the polarities are harmonized, the complexities are simplified, and the paradoxes have their solution. We are one. That is our nature and our purpose. We are old upon your planet and have served with varying degrees of success in transmitting the law of one, of unity, of singleness to your peoples. We have walked your earth. We have seen the faces of your peoples. This is not so with many of the entities of the Confederation. We found it was not efficacious.
Or effective.
However, we then felt the great responsibility of staying in the capacity of removing the distortions and powers that had been given to the law of one. We will continue in this until your, shall we say, cycle is appropriately ended, if not this one, then the next. We are not a part of time, and thus are able to be with you in any of your times. Does this give you enough information from which to extract our purpose, my brother?
That last bit there, when they said, we are not a part of time, and thus are able to be with you in any of your times. Let that sink in. Sixth density beings are outside the confines of time. So, my question is, why would anybody ever leave the sixth density to incarnate down here in the 3D? I just need to tell my higher self this might not have been such a good idea. And remember when Ra said, we then felt the great responsibility of staying in the capacity of removing the distortions and powers that had been given to the law of one? So, Ra admits that they were too eager to harvest mankind, and thereby they made a mistake that they're still trying to rectify. And they said themselves, they've been around for a long time trying to harvest souls of mankind. I just don't get why my oversoul would allow my dumb 3D ass to pick the path. No wonder this takes so damn long. And another thing I noticed is the beings that comprise Ra, they're all polarized. I mean, that's what they said. The polarities are harmonized. So for me, that means they are way more evolved than us folks who are stuck down here in the third density. And I know, we're supposed to be moving into fourth density. But y'all should know, later in the material, Ra says, it'll take 100 to 700 years for that to happen. So, it's a moot point, because we're all still stuck down here in this 3D existence. Also, another interesting point was when they said, we are not those of the love or of the light. We are those who are of the law of one. And y'all, I read somewhere that love represents the fourth density and light or wisdom is the fifth. And if that's the case, then Ra's telling us that they're above the fourth and fifth densities. And we'll get more into densities later. Right now, I'm just wondering, is this what happens when an entity enters the sixth density? Did we all become messengers of the law of one? Okay, so let's move on to Q&A number 2, which is basically Dawn responding to Ra's last inquiry positively and saying, thank you. To which Ra says,
we appreciate your vibration. Is there another query?
Q&A number 3, question. I've heard of the name Ra in connection with the Egyptians. Are you connected with that Ra in any way?
I am Ra. Yes, the connection is congruency. May we elucidate?
Elucidate. Yeah, we had to look that up. It means to explain. Let's not forget, I'm here to dumb this down into 3D terms. That said, so the Ra that's speaking through Carla and the sun god Ra that the Egyptians worshipped are one and the same. And y'all, Q&A number 4 is basically Don responding to Ra's inquiry about elucidating, to which Don says, please do. And y'all know what Ra says?
What do you not understand?
Yeah, we found that pretty funny. Seems Ra has a sense of humor. Q&A number 5. Question. Could you give me a little more detail about your role with the Egyptians?
I am Ra. The identity of the vibration Ra is our identity. We as a group, or what you would call a social memory complex, made contact with a race of your planetary kind, which you call Egyptians. Others from our density made contact at the same time in South America and the so-called lost cities, where their attempts to contribute to the law of one.
So, what that tells me is we've had a lot of folks from the 6th density trying to use this 3D planet as a recruiting pool. But anyway, back to Ra.
We spoke to one who heard and understood and was in a position to decree the law of one. However, the priests and peoples of that era quickly distorted our message, robbing it of the, shall we say, compassion with which unity is informed by its very nature. Since it contains all, it cannot abhor any.
That sounds familiar. And yeah, there are people out there right now who are distorting the message, in my opinion. And the person they're talking about in Egypt was Akhenaten. But anyway, back to Ra.
When we were no longer able to have appropriate channels through which to enunciate the law of one, we removed ourselves from the now hypocritical position which we had allowed ourselves to be placed in, and other myths, shall we say, other understandings, having more to do with polarity and the things of your vibrational complex, again took over in that particular society complex.
Okay, so from where I'm sitting, Ra admits they aren't perfect, that they made an error in judgment. I mean, they said, we removed ourselves from the now hypocritical position which we had allowed ourselves to be placed in. So, they're not perfect, and they do make mistakes. I also find it interesting how they call myths other understandings. Nevertheless, back to Ra.
Does this form a sufficient amount of information, or could we speak further?
And I'm sorry to say that question number 6 was inaudible, but we do know that Ra asked,
Is there another quarry?
Q&A number 7. Unfortunately, the question is inaudible. The transcript states the question was lost because the questioner was sitting too far from the tape recorder to be recorded. But Ra's answer, however, is intact.
I am Ra. Consider, if you will, that the universe is infinite. This has yet to be proven or disproven, but we can assure you that there is no end to yourselves. Your understanding, what you would call your journey of seeking, or your perceptions of the creation, that which is infinite cannot be many, for manyness is a finite concept. To have infinity, you must identify or define that infinity as unity, Otherwise, the term does not have any referent or meaning. In an infinite creator, there is only unity. You have seen simple examples of unity. You have seen the prism, which shows all colors stemming from the sunlight. This is a simplistic example of unity. In truth, there is no right or wrong. There is no polarity, for all will be, as you would say, reconciled at some point in your dance through the mind-body-spirit complex, which you amuse yourself by distorting in various ways at this time. This distortion is not in any case necessary.
Okay, so in your dance through the mind-body-spirit complex, that's an interesting thought. And then when they further say that we amuse ourselves by distorting, which I take to mean creating chaos in our lives, but it's not necessary. And you know, one could argue that perspective, but that's for another discussion. For now, let's get back to Ra's answer, and they're talking about distortion in case I made y'all forget.
It is chosen by each of you as an alternative to understanding the complete unity of thought which binds all things. You are not speaking of similar or somewhat like entities or things. You are everything, every being, every emotion, every event, every situation. You are unity. You are infinity. You are love, light, light, love. You are. This is the law of one.
That's all about that veil thing and why we don't remember what's really going on. You know, it seems to me we'd get a lot further if we did. Just saying. And y'all, I just want to point out, we may all be connected in the grand scheme of things, but we weren't meant to be that here in the 3D. Here in the 3D, we are supposed to be soul and separate beings traveling down our own paths. Look, y'all, we cannot skip 4th and 5th densities and go straight to the unity of 6th density. We have to go it alone for a while. If y'all stick with us through all 106 of these sessions, you'll better understand why. But anyway, Ra wraps up their answer with,
May we enunciate this law in more detail.
Q&A number 8. And y'all, I'm sorry to say, the question is inaudible. Ra simply responds with,
Is there another quarry at this time?
Q&A number 9. Question. Can you say anything about the coming planetary changes?
I am Ra. I preferred to wait until this instrument had again reached the proper state of depths of singleness or one-pointedness before we spoke. The changes are very, very trivial. We do not concern ourselves with the conditions which bring about harvest.
Yeah, 'cause they want the harvest to happen. So no, I don't think anybody's going to save us from some catastrophic occurrence that's bound to happen sooner rather than later. Nevertheless, let's move on. Q&A number 10. Question. Is it possible to create any acceleration of understanding in other entities, or are all efforts by the individual on himself accelerating his understanding? In other words, if an individual tries to act as a catalyst in general to increase the awareness of planetary consciousness, is he doing nothing but acting upon himself? Or is it possible, and y'all, I'm sorry to say, that the rest of Don's question is inaudible. However, Ra's answer is intact.
I am Ra. We shall answer your question in two parts, both of which are important equally. Firstly, you must understand that the distinction between yourself and others is not visible to us. We do not consider that a separation exists between the consciousness raising efforts of the distortion which you project as a personality and the distortion which you project as an other personality. Thus, to learn is the same as to teach, unless you are not teaching what you are learning, in which case you have done, they little or no good. This understanding should be pondered by your mind-body-spirit complex, as it is a distortion which plays a part in your experiences at this nexus. To turn to the second part of our response, may we state our understanding, limited though it is.
This one is very deep, yet I do understand why it behooves us to share our thoughts and knowledge of the Law of One. And just as an aside, the remainder of the original audio recording of Session 1 was not available for the re-listening project. The audio tape was reused for another purpose after transcription. And y'all, being a writer myself, that whole notion blows me away. But anyway, the following is a lightly edited version of the rest of Session 1 as published in the original volume of The Law of One, Book 1. Ra continues with,
Group individuated consciousness is that state of sharing understanding with the other distortions of mind-body-spirit complex, which are within the evident reach of the mind-body-spirit complex individual or group. Thus we are speaking to you and accepting both our distortions and your own in order to enunciate the laws of creation, more especially the law of one. We are not available to many of your peoples, for this is not an easily understood way of communication or type of philosophy. However, our very being is hopefully a poignant example of both the necessity and the near hopelessness of attempting to teach. Each of those in this group is striving to use, digest, and diversify the information which we are sending this instrument into the channels of the mind-body-spirit complex without distortion. The few whom you will illuminate by sharing your light are far more than enough reason for the greatest possible effort to serve one is to serve all. Therefore, we offer the question back to you to state that indeed it is the only activity worth doing to learn, teach, or teach, learn. There is nothing else which is of aid in demonstrating the original thought except your very being and the distortions that come from the unexplained, inarticulate, or mystery-clad being are many. Thus, to attempt to discern and weave your way through as many group mind-body-spirit distortions as possible among your peoples and in the course of your teaching is a very good effort to make. We can speak no more valiantly of your desire to serve. May we speak in any other capacity upon this subject.
So, what they said, to learn teach or teach learn is the only activity worth doing. Let that sink in. And y'all, when they say learn teach, teach learn, what it basically means is that you can't learn without teaching and you can't teach without learning. The same with light love and love light. But anyway, on to Q&A number 11. Question: will you be available for communication? Can we call on you in the future?
I am Ra. We have good contact with this instrument because of her recent experiences with trance. She is to be able to communicate our thoughts in your future. However, we advise care in disturbing the channel for a few moments and then the proper procedure for aiding an instrument who has, to some extent, the need of re-entering the mind-body-spirit complex, which the instrument has chosen for the life experience of this time-space.
So, that tells me that Carla must have left her body during these channelings. And I wonder where she went. I believe I've read that she didn't remember the sessions once they were over, so it's doubtful she was still there in the room with them. Her soul, I mean. Anyway, Ra wraps up this answer saying,
do you understand how to nurture this instrument?
Q&A number 12. Question: no. Could you explain it?
We suggest first a brief period of silence, then the repetition of the instrument's vibratory complex of sound in your density, which you call name. Repeat until an answer is obtained. Then the laying on of the hands at the neck region for a brief period so that the instrument may recharge batteries which are not, shall we say, full of the essence of this particular field at this time. And finally, a gift of water into which the love of all present has been given. This will restore this entity for her distortions contain great sensitivity towards the vibrations of love, and the charged water will affect comfort. Do you now understand?
Q&A number 13. Dawn responds with, not completely.
I am Ra. We search your mind to find the vibration Alrak. It is this vibration from you which contains the largest amount of what you would call love. Others would call this entity Carla. The charging of the water is done by those present placing their hands over the glass and visualizing the power of love entering the water. This will charge that very effective medium with those vibrations. This instrument is at this time quite fatigued. However, her heart is such that she continues to remain open to us and useful as a channel. This is why we have spent the time-space explaining how the distortions of what you may call fatigue may be ameliorated.
Which basically means to make something that's bad or worse better. Nevertheless, Ra continues.
Under no circumstances should this instrument be touched until she has responded to her name. I do not wish to take this instrument beyond her capacity for physical energy. It grows low. Therefore, I must leave this instrument. I leave you in the glory and peace of unity. Go forth in peace, rejoicing in the power of the one Creator. I am Ra.
Okay, so, one thing I want to point out. It seems like Ra is saying that Carla's higher self's name is Alrak. Okay, so, this brings us to the end of session 1. And y'all, I am gobsmacked that they taped over this session. But here we are. I'm glad, though, that there is at least a transcript available. And with this being the first contact between Ra and the group, on the face of things, it appears that Ra has good intentions. But we have 105 more sessions to go. So, on the whole, even after hearing about the Law of One and Ra for the first time, and then reading through the transcripts multiple times, if I'm being honest, I think Ra is for the most part harmless, albeit a bit manipulative overall. Now, make no mistake, when I say harmless, I don't mean that Ra is incapable of producing harm. I just don't think they utilize bodily harm in their efforts to harvest us. No, I think they're more of the "we want you to come willingly" type of collective. But as for their true intent, I think it behooves us to reserve judgment until after we've gone through all 106 sessions. I will say this, the word harvest doesn't scare me as much as it used to. My guides have given me the word recruit in its place, which I resonate with much, much easier. But at this point in the game, after reading just one session, that first session, what I really wanted to know was who and what did Ra truly represent? Because, look y'all, there are a lot of things that Ra says that could be taken in multiple ways, if we're all being honest. I just urge everyone to listen, keep an open mind. If what they say resonates, wonderful. If not, that's fine too.
This wraps up session 1. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with session 2.
Later, Gators.